It's 10:58 p.m. on a Saturday night in East Houston, Texas. Two young boys' cousins are running through the dark streets of their neighborhood, laughing, breathless. They've been knocking on doors all night. A harmless game. A prank kids have played for generations. They pick one last house. 9700 Racine Street. They knock, then run. But this time, someone is already waiting for them. Hidden in the shadows on the side of the house, dressed in all black, is a 42-year-old man. He steps out. He raises a pistol. One shot into the ground. Then, a second shot. 11-year-old Julian Guzman drops to the pavement, shot in the back, as he ran away. His cousin pulls him across the sidewalk. Julian is crying. He says he can't feel his legs. The man who fired the shots. He walks back inside his house and closes the door. Julian was rushed to the hospital that night. He never made it home. By the next morning, August 31st, 2025, he was gone. He was 11 years old. What happened inside that house on Racine Street that night? Why was a man hiding in the shadows, waiting, before those boys even knocked for the last time? And here's what makes this case even more complicated. The man who pulled that trigger isn't who you might expect. He's a military veteran, a father, a husband, a man with no prior criminal record who had served in Afghanistan and was honorably discharged. Inside his home, police found more than 20 firearms, rifles, shotguns, pistols, all stored in a small closet near the front door. Was this self-defense? Was this a man protecting his family, his wife, his 3-year-old child? Or was this something far darker? Because Julian Guzman wasn't at the door when he was shot. He was running away on a public sidewalk when the bullet hit him in the back. One decision, one trigger pull, and now a man faces the death penalty. How did we get here? And what does the evidence really show? Welcome to True Crime Stories, where we follow the facts, chase the truth, and give a voice to those who can no longer speak for themselves. Today we are breaking down the full story of Gonzalo Leon Jr. and the night that shattered a community, from the first knock on that door to the courtroom where a grand jury has now handed down a capital murder indictment. If you're watching this and you want to know every detail, the evidence, the cell phone video, the SWAT standoff, and what happens next in that courtroom, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. Because this case is still unfolding, and we will be here every step of the way. Don't miss a single details. Earlier that Saturday, the Guzman family had gathered to celebrate. Relatives crowded into a modest home somewhere in the Galena Park area, food, laughter, children weaving between adults. Julian was among them. Bright-eyed, energetic, full of the kind of restless spirit that makes 11-year-olds impossible to contain indoors for long. By the time the evening settled in, Julian and his cousin had drifted away from the festivities. Not out of trouble, just boredom. The particular boredom only children understand, where even a perfectly good party stops feeling like enough. So they took to the streets. What they chose to do next was nothing new. Knock on a stranger's door, flee before anyone answered, giggle around the corner, classic, foolish, harmless, or so they believed. Detectives would later piece together that the pair visited 9700 Racine Street not once, but 3 separate times within a 15-minute window. 3 knocks, 3 retreats, 3 opportunities for whatever was building inside that property to reach its breaking point. What neither child could see, what no neighbor on that quiet block could see, was that after the second visit something shifted. The occupant of the house was no longer simply annoyed. According to investigators, Gonzalo Leon Jr. had positioned himself outside, concealed along the darkened side wall, armed and patient, waiting. Investigators later recovered cell phone footage that captured audio of the door knocks, the gunfire, and the sound of a child gasping. Evidence prosecutors say tells its own devastating story. When the cousins approached for the final time, They had no idea the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Leon allegedly discharged a single round into the ground, what some would later describe as a warning. But Julian was already sprinting, feet pounding the concrete sidewalk, moving away from the property entirely. A second shot rang through the neighborhood. Julian pitched forward, collapsing onto the pavement yards from the front yard boundary. A bullet had entered his back. His cousin dropped beside him. Julian whispered that his legs felt wrong, paralyzed, unresponsive. A neighbor emerged and attempted to assist. Across the yard, Leon reportedly turned, walked through his front entrance, and disappeared inside without uttering a word. By September 1st, Houston had already learned Julian's name. Vigils flickered across Galena Park. Flowers and handwritten cards accumulated near the corner of Racine and Mimbra. Grief, however, had quickly curdled into fury, because the individual responsible had not yet been taken into custody. Officers had initially approached 9700 Racine Street with loudspeakers mounted on tactical vehicles. 20 minutes of announcements echoed through the neighborhood. Leon eventually stepped outside voluntarily, yet was released after invoking his constitutional right to legal representation and declining all questioning. That decision enraged many following the developing story. A child lay deceased. The trigger had been pulled, and the perpetrator walked free, at least temporarily. Prosecutors formally filed a murder charge on September 1st. By dawn on September 2nd, a SWAT unit had tracked Leon approximately 20 miles east of his Racine property to a La Quinta Inn in La Porte, Texas. He had apparently checked himself in overnight, perhaps believing distance offered protection. It did not. Officers surrounded the hotel, secured the perimeter, and extracted him without resistance. Photographs taken outside showed a heavy-set, subdued figure escorted into custody. A stark visual contrast to the armed silhouette witnesses described lurking beside a darkened exterior wall 2 nights prior. A search warrant executed at the Racine property yielded approximately 20 firearms, AR-style rifles, shotguns, and multiple handguns, discovered stockpiled in a closet near the entryway. Prosecutors argued this suggested deliberate preparation, not spontaneous fear. On September 3rd, Leon appeared before Judge Emily DeToto in the 177th District Court. District Attorney Sean Terre addressed the bench directly, calling the killing brutal and deliberate. Defense counsel countered, portraying their client as a decorated Afghan veteran. Classified 40% disabled through the VA, whose household had been economically devastated by the arrest. Bond landed at $1 million.
Currently, Gonzalo Leon Jr. has a $1 million bond on a murder charge, which his defense attorneys argue is high compared to similar cases.
On to $1.3 million. Still, he remained incarcerated, unable to post. Outside, Julian's relatives held each other. They weren't celebrating procedure. They wanted justice, and they understood something the courtroom paperwork couldn't yet reflect. The prosecution was quietly assembling something far heavier than a standard murder charge. While Houston grieved through the autumn of 2025, the legal machinery ground forward at its own deliberate pace. On January 8, 2026, defense attorneys stood before Judge Emily DeToto once more, appealing to reduce the $1.3 million bond, characterizing their client as a devoted patriarch incapable of endangering anyone further. Attorney Gianpaolo Massarola painted Leon as financially devastated, physically limited by his VA disability rating, and deeply remorseful. DeToto was unmoved. Records indicated Leon had attempted to evade capture following the incident. The La Porte Hotel stay weighed heavily. Bond reduction denied. He remained locked inside a Harris County facility, his fate suspended between two radically opposing versions of that Saturday evening. Then came April 29, 2026. A reconvened grand jury delivered something seismic, a formal capital murder indictment against Gonzalo Leon Jr. Under Texas statute, deliberately ending the existence of a child aged between 10 and 15 constitutes capital murder, triggering either execution or permanent imprisonment without any possibility of release. Julian had turned 11 just months prior. He fit the statute precisely. On May 1, 2026, Leon shuffled into the courtroom facing an entirely reconfigured reality. Bond climbed to $1.5 million. The earlier murder indictment evaporated, absorbed entirely into something exponentially graver. Every previous charge now felt like prologue. "It's literally life and death," Attorney Massarola acknowledged publicly. The stakes get higher when facing a capital indictment. For Julian's relatives seated across that aisle, those stakes had always felt absolute from the very first anguished phone call on August 31st. Prosecutors insist the audio recovered from Julian's cellular device obliterates any self-defense narrative: footsteps retreating, gunfire, a child gasping, sequential, damning, irreversible. DA Terre has been categorical. No way that boy posed any threat. The sidewalk placement of the fatal wound, posterior entry, body oriented away, reinforces that position geometrically. Yet Massarola anchors his defense upon intent. Proving capital murder demands prosecutors demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt that Leon consciously, deliberately targeted Julian specifically. A darkened yard, multiple nocturnal disturbances, a veteran conditioned by combat to perceive threats acutely. These variables, defense argues, introduce doubt sufficient to spare their client the ultimate consequence. Somewhere beyond the procedural language and evidentiary arguments exists a simpler, unbearable truth. A family gathered to celebrate. Two young cousins sought a fleeting thrill, and a child never returned home. Julian Guzman's sneakers are still somewhere in that neighborhood. His laughter still echoes in the memory of everyone who loved him, and every date stamped onto a court document, every hearing, every indictment, every deferred ruling, represents another calendar page turned without him. The trial ahead will be consequential, but for the Guzman family, no verdict restores what Racine Street took from them on the final Saturday of August 2025. This case remains active. We will keep tracking every development, every motion filed, every witness called, every moment of reckoning inside that courtroom. Because Julian deserves witnesses, and so does the truth.